Removing roadblocks to improve SharePoint adoption. Making things difficult for end users is not conducive to successful SharePoint adoption. To make the platform convenient to use, you have to remove any barriers that put end users into laborious and time-consuming steps. In this short video, Curtis Hughes, CIO at Midrex Technologies, outlines steps for the starting point. To watch the complete 1-hour course on 5 proven steps to improve SharePoint adoption, click the link below to go to visualsp.com.
So step 4, we got all those things done, and some orgs, and organizations do a great job of building bridges. Some of them build a plan. Some of them have all these great things. But unfortunately, we see a lot of people that maybe build these bridges that are curvy, that are kind of full of potholes, and they're really painful to cross. Maybe there's a bridge, but it's kind of painful. And so how many of your users, I would ask you this question, right? How many of your users feel like working in SharePoint involves kind of crossing an electric fence or barbed wire to get things done? How many really feel like there's roadblocks in place, right? And you may say, no, not us. Everyone can get access to it. Maybe, but is it easy for them to use, or do they have to jump through hoops? You see, security and permissions and access and those kind of things is just one roadblock that we often see in SharePoint, just making it difficult. But there's a ton of other things that add all these barriers in place that make it hard. I mean, that's the easiest way to say it, right? Is what you're doing making it hard? Is there some way I can eliminate that extra click or that extra, place that they have to go to see that? Can I surface some information? Remove all the roadblocks and make it as easy as possible, because we're very fragmented, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So I'd ask you a question, and I'd pose this to everyone here. When was the last time that you actually stopped and asked your users how SharePoint was working for them and what they would change? I mean, it's a fair question, right? When was the last time you sent out a survey? Maybe you just asked a single department that are heavy users. What don't you like about SharePoint? One of the things I love to do is the start, stop, continue, I'll call them. And so you send out a survey or something, maybe an email, and just say, hey, could you tell me 3 things SharePoint should start doing, 3 things it should stop doing, and 3 things it should continue to do? Really easy, doesn't ask for a whole lot of, commentary. Just give me 3 things, start, stop, continue. It's amazing what you'll get back. But a lot of organizations aren't doing that, right? They're not even asking, what can we do differently, right? How can we actually change how people are working for the better? And is it actually, what we delivered, is it actually helping them? Or have they done something different and they're working around those kind of things now, right? So there's a ton of these potential roadblocks. But what I want to share is just 3 of these that we see regularly and that are really hurting adoption. I'll just give you kind of the top 3, if you will, of these roadblocks. So the first one is around governance. And I know governance is a hot topic. A lot of people would kind of, that you're talking about governance and that it actually is a roadblock. We're huge fans of governance, huge proponents. We build governance plans. But without a doubt, the one thing that you've really got to make sure of is that your governance is balanced. And we've seen this shift, I think with so much, with the compliance and regulatory, that people are taking this very rigid approach to governance and applying it across their entire SharePoint implementation. And so I came up with kind of this rigid at the core, flexible at the edges model. And so if you think about this sphere, it's really SharePoint. Think of it like your SharePoint. And you've got your core. Every organization has their core, and that's your non-negotiables, things you just have to have in place. Maybe that's corporate metadata. Maybe that's retention and auditing policies. Maybe that's some sort of HIPAA or SOX or some sort of compliance. Maybe that's the content that gets published to your homepage that has to go through approval. Whatever that case may be, the things that, hey, this is the way it is, we've got to have these in place. That's your core. Everything else, to be honest, is pretty much your edges. When you look out at your collaboration, your team sites, maybe your OneDrive for Business, whatever you're using, and where departments kind of play, and some of these other areas where project sites are happening, check in, check out, locations, keywords, personal views. I mean, we see some of these things so locked down that people can't work the way they actually need to work. And so what happens is they actually just find another way around it, right? Users are going to do what they need to do to get their work done. And so instead of using the secure system that you've put in place in SharePoint and this great platform where everybody can benefit from the content, they're going around and I mean, we see this all the time, and they're using an FTP site. Maybe they're doing Dropbox. Maybe they're emailing this thing around. I mean, you name it. The sky's the limit. People are going to do what they need to do. So why not give them a platform that actually works the way they work? And if you'll think about it, all this really goes back to knowing how the users work. What kind of teams are going to be collaborating on those sites? Where are they going to be located when they do the collaboration? Do they need external sharing? Is that okay to turn that on? What do they need? And so making sure really that we have a balanced view of governance. You've got to make sure you look at both sides of this. The next thing I want to talk about is this idea of ROT. And I don't know, how many of you have never heard this term ROT? And a lot of people really haven't heard this, R-O-T. And it stands for redundant, obsolete, or outdated and trivial. And I can guarantee many of you probably haven't heard of that term, but I can guarantee that your users and you probably have experienced it in your organization. And really what it has to do with is just all the outdated, the redundant, the trivial content that's getting in the way. And most often we see this redundant and outdated or obsolete content. We had a client that was doing searches and some of the searches were bringing back results from 2004, and this was like a year or two ago. So 10-year-old, results that didn't even matter anymore. So why is that in there? How do we get a handle on that? And so this ROT, a lot of people think that by storing all this content and having all this extra data, it's really costing us in, storage, and we've got to store all this data somewhere, or maybe it's online storage or whatever it is. But to be honest, that's actually the least of what it's actually costing, because at the end of the day, this is kind of how it plays out. There's a lot of ROT, and people go to find something in your SharePoint, let's say, right? And they spend a few minutes, and I don't know about you, but I don't have an hour to try to look for something. So a couple things happen. One, they persist and they keep on looking for it, and maybe it doesn't take an hour, maybe it takes a few minutes or a half hour or something like that, and they finally find it. And then once they find it, what they do is they say, well, you know what? I don't have to go through that again. I don't even know where that is. So maybe they bookmark it, or most often they'll download that, right? Or email it to themselves so they have it in their email, or download it locally, or store it somewhere else. So now you've got this copy that's no longer kept up to date, right? They just got this copy of it, and now they've got it offline, and they want to store that the way they want to store it, or share it the way they want to store it. And so that's one of the big issues is trying to find it. The other issue is that there was a study, I can't remember who did the study, but I actually read that 70% of users have said they've recreated something because they weren't able to find it fast enough. 70%. And so how many users in your organization, and think about across the world, how many people are recreating stuff and spending time recreating because they can't find it fast enough, because they can't get to it. And a lot of people are struggling with this search and with this kind of content management and this content struggle right now. And so I'd ask you, how much ROT do you think you have in your SharePoint? How much of this old, outdated content, redundant, maybe it doesn't make sense, maybe it's confusing, how much is in there? Well, we've actually seen, and this is from AIM, the average company considers about 58% of their content to be ROT, almost 60%. So let's say you just have half of this. 29-30% of your content is probably ROT. I can almost guarantee that. So what are you doing about it? How are you handling that? And we've got a ton of ideas and things on that. If you want some more of those, reach out. We've got some templates of how to identify ROT and some scripts and things like that. But you've got to identify, just remember, redundant, outdated, or trivial. How do I identify that content, figure out what buckets that's in, and then figure out what needs to happen with it? And not only the initial getting rid of the ROT content, but how do I make sure I don't get ROT in the future? What are the policies that say after a year this goes up for approval and we have to push it off somewhere? What happens then, right? What do I do? What do I do when that happens? The last one I want to talk about is really what I kind of call less is more, and I'll talk about it, and I talked about it a little bit in my Building a Better Intranet session, but this one is big for adoption, and I kind of call it the ABCs of less is more, something really easy to remember. So let's just go through these one by one. So the first thing is the attention span. Most users today, when they're using SharePoint, Intranet, these collaboration tools, 365, they have about a 2 to 3 second attention span. They want to be able to find where they need to go and what they're looking for, even if it's just the next link that they need to click on, within 2 to 3 seconds of scanning a page. We don't have time to just sit there and just kind of browse and click around and things like that. Some of you may, but most users do not. So we really got to think about, how do we surface the information quickly? Maybe it's the top left most thing that we put. How do we organize content on our pages? Where do we put it? How do we make sure it's clean and clear and really focused on what they're trying to get out of it? The B is for this bite-sized delivery, and I was just talking about this before the session began. And this is really how we deliver content. So, the old way of thinking used to be, hey, we just put a bunch of content on a page, and we want to minimize clicks, right? We don't want people to have to click through. But today, we're so fragmented and we're so bombarded with information overload that we really want things in really small pieces. If you think about how apps are designed and those kind of things, we want it clean, and we want to deliver things in this bite, snack, and meal format. The bite being just a little bit. Tell me exactly what I need to know. And then what's the snack? What's the next little piece that I can get? And honestly, some people might stop at the snack. They've got enough. They've got enough information, and that's all they needed. If you want more, you dig into the meal. You get the full wiki page on all this information or the full document. Maybe I just wanted to stop at the snack, and that's who updated it last or something like that. And I'll show you a couple of how this looks in just a minute. And then the last one is just being consistent. I mean, you'd be amazed at how many organizations have every single department page looks different. Things are in the left corner, the right corner, the bottom, the footer, all over the place, right? And so consistency is key. Familiarity breeds findability, right? If it's familiar, we'll be able to find it easy, and it's consistent. All of us want something consistent. The keys on our keyboard, where things are located, right? And we want it to be consistent. The same thing should be true within your sites. I know there's going to be some differences, but if you have a contact information, don't put it on the left or the bottom on one and the right and the top on another. Make sure everything you do is consistent throughout, and so it'll be in the same place. So let me show you a little bit about what this looks like. So two great examples I just like to show, and kind of extremes, if you will. So the one up on the top left, obviously our friend Google there, but a lot of you use this search engine, maybe you use Bing, but very similar. They know you're there to search, right? What are we there for? We're there to search. What's front and center? Search with a couple buttons on it, right? I mean, that's it. One box with a couple buttons. Now look around the page and you can get to everything else you need to get to. They've got things tucked away in the top right. You can get to all the other applications. You can get to your account settings. You can navigate anywhere you want to go. The bottom left, the bottom right, there's a few things. But front and center, they know you're there to search. So again, going back to the users, what they need on this department page or on this landing page, what are the users in that department or that are going to be using that page the most? What do they care about? What do they need? What content needs to be front and center? We've got to think about that. On the other side, we've got kind of the White House page, and this is a great example of a couple things here, and really around the bite, snack, meal. So if you look at their top navigation, I mean, in general, we recommend anywhere from 5 to 7 at the most, usually around 4 or 5 top level navigation. But the bite here is issues. That's the issues. All right, I know I want that. The snack is, maybe it's economy. That's the economy. And I can see the top issues that are going on with the economy. If I click on economy, then I get everything going on in the specific item for one economic issue, right? Same thing for education or healthcare. And so delivering things in this really, how do I get there really fast? I mean, this would allow people to get there really, really fast. Look at Starbucks.com. Look at how they do their menu. It's a mega menu like this that starts with menu, then drinks, then all the specific drinks, bite, snack, meal. Take advantage of the organizations out there that have spent millions of dollars on the user experience and how they deliver content, and leverage that on your SharePoint. I guarantee that's how your users are thinking as well. They want to get things very, very quickly. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but it's a great way to think about it.
If you would like to automate training and support for your team, install Visual SP, the plug-and-play, instant, and context-sensitive self-help system for SharePoint and Office 365 end users. Over 2 million users and over 200 companies are using Visual SP to boost end-user adoption and reduce the burden on their IT support teams. Using Visual SP's step-by-step intuitive guidance tools, let your colleagues get access to help wherever and whenever they need it, facilitate employee onboarding with always accessible tip sheets, annotated screenshots, step-by-step walkthroughs, and screen capture videos. Accelerate user adoption of your business workflows and improve productivity. To request a free demo and see how Visual SP works, click the link below to go to visualsp.com.